Hello students, my name is Stephen Reginald III. Most of my students at the university refer to me as Mr. Reggie, so you may do the same. Mr. Young asked me to fill in this week and help you guys look at all the different manners you've learned to solve quadratic equations. You have learned many of them. One would be graphing. The next one you learned was factoring. Then you looked at square roots, completing the square, and then I believe the last 2 weeks you have learned the quadratic formula. Each of these ways work really well under certain situations. So this week we're going to learn which one of these 5 methods will be the best for a given problem. So we'll make a little table here. A few weeks ago when you learned about solving by graphing, you learned that the best time to do that is when it's already graphed. Okay, graphing a quadratic function can be difficult and time-consuming, so there's no reason to use this one unless it's already graphed. For example, let's say this was your graph. There's a graph of a quadratic function. Remember, once it's graphed, all you have to do is look for the x-intercept. So on this one, the solutions would be x equals 1 and x equals -3. Okay? So if the function is already graphed, solve it by graphing. Just find the x-intercepts. That's probably the only time you'll want to use that technique. Now, what about factoring? Let me grab a drink of my tea here. So good. Always Earl Grey. I love Earl Grey. Alright, let's try this one. X squared plus 10x equals 13. Okay? Notice in this one, we have just x squared. There's not a coefficient at the front. It's not 3x squared. It's just 1x squared. And also notice this is an even number. In this situation, this is a great way to do completing the square. Okay? So complete the square works best when it's x squared and b is even. Okay? If b is an odd number, when you take half of it and square it, you're going to get weird fractions. Okay? Remember, complete the square. It's been a few weeks. First we find half of b, so that would be 5, and then we square that number. 5 times 5 is 25, so we're going to add 25 to each side. See, that would be 38. Okay? Then we factor this side, and the nice thing is when you factor them, they always look like this, and that number is whatever half of b was. Remember that from a few weeks back? Okay? Once you factor it, square root each side. And a lot of you made the mistake of forgetting to square root this side, sometimes because you skipped a step, okay? Mr. Young says be careful, make sure you actually do the square root, okay? If you don't know what the square root of 38 is, that's where you get a calculator. I know it's 6 point something. So let's see, square root of 38 is 6.16. And then remember we had 2 equations, one positive, one negative, and then we solve each equation. So -5 and -5. Those are our 2 solutions. And as always, it's a great idea to check your answers. So plug these into the original equation. It should make the equation true. If it doesn't, you probably messed up somewhere, okay? So completing the square works excellent when b is even and it's just x squared. It also works really nicely if it's x squared plus even number times x, and the other number is already on the other side. But it's not always. Let's try this one. Okay, notice this one is x squared, x, blah, blah, blah. If you have one like this, I would recommend always try factoring first. Okay, so we need two numbers that multiply to make negative 14, add to make negative 5. If I do a little bit of work, I will figure out that that is negative 7 and positive 2. Remember, if you can't figure those out, just list all the different ways to multiply to make negative 14. Once you factor it, you make each side equal 0, solve each side. There we go. So factoring is very quick and very easy. The downside is that not everything factors, okay? So sometimes factoring will not work. Okay, so factoring, you should always try it first if it's just x squared. If there was a 4 in front of the x, that makes it a lot more difficult. So maybe we try a different method, okay? So if you get one that's just x squared, try factoring it first. If it doesn't factor, and b is an even number, you can try completing the square. If b is odd and it doesn't factor, then maybe we'll try quadratic formula, okay? So factoring is a great first thing to try if it's just x squared. Let's try this one. Alright, let's see. It's not graphed, so we're not going to use graphing. We got this negative 2 at the front, so it will be very difficult to factor. So let's not factor it. Square roots we probably can't use. Let's see, complete the square. If it's just x squared and b is even, that would work. Well, this one is neither of those. So let's try the quadratic formula. Remember the quadratic formula from last week? It's negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared plus negative 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So let's see. A is negative 2, b is 5, c is negative 8. Let's fill in the equation. Negative b plus and minus the square root b squared plus negative 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And then we will simplify a little bit. Let's see. Negative 5. 5 squared is 5 times 5. That means 25. Mr. Young says some of you were doing 5 times 2. Or 5 plus 5. Okay? Remember, 5 squared means 5 times 5. And then let's see. Plus negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. Positive 8 times negative 8 is negative 64. All over negative 4. We can simplify a little bit more. Let's see. 25 minus 64 is negative 39. The square root of negative 39, we do not know yet how to find the square root of a negative number. So remember, once you get square root of a negative number, your answer is no real solutions. Okay, as you found out the last couple weeks, the quadratic formula works all the time, but it's very long and difficult, and it's easy to make a mistake. So the quadratic formula, the best time to use that is when nothing else works. Okay, you could also say if a does not equal 1, that's a good time. If there's a number in front of the x squared, that's usually a good time to try the quadratic formula. Last one. X minus 3 squared minus 4 equals 0. Let's see, could we graph it? We maybe could. It'd be difficult. Factoring, that's not a great one for factoring because it looks weird. Complete the square, x squared and an even b. Well, I don't even know where b is on this one. We could use the quadratic formula, but I don't know what a is. So let's try square roots, okay? Square roots works great when something is already squared. Remember, squared means to the second power. On this one, the x minus 3 is already squared. So we're going to use square roots. First step was to get the squared part by itself. So I get rid of that minus 4. And then we're going to take the square root of each side. Let's see, the square root of 4 is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. The other square root of 4 is negative 2. Remember, there's almost always 2 square roots. And then we solve each equation. And we get x equals 5 and x equals 1. We should check those real quick to make sure. Let's see, 5 minus 3 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. Remember, when you square something, it is always positive. 4 minus 4 is 0, so that one works as well. You should always check your answers, especially if you use quadratic formula, okay? That is it, okay? So you have learned 5 different ways to solve these. Graphing works great if the function is already graphed. Otherwise, I wouldn't try that one. Factoring you should try first, especially if it's just x squared at the front. Sometimes factoring doesn't work. If it doesn't work and b, the number in front of the x, is even, you could complete the square. Square roots works great if something is already squared. Another example where square roots would work great is if it was like x squared equals 49. You could just do the square root of each side. Okay, so x squared with no x's, right? There's not like a 4x anywhere here. So it also works there. And then if nothing else works, quadratic formula is great because it works every time, even though it's difficult, okay? Mr. Young says your homework for this week is, I believe he said it was 10 problems. You can pick whichever method you want to solve them, okay? Your goal for this week is to decide which method will work best for each problem, okay? You can always use the quadratic formula. That's the nice thing about it. But sometimes it's not the easiest or the quickest way, okay? So you pick how you want to solve the 10 problems. Probably one of these methods will be better for each one. That is it. You folks have a great day. Enjoy your math. I will enjoy my tea. And we will see you next time.